May 1945. Nazi Germany had just surrendered. General Dwight D. Eisenhower stood at the pinnacle of global power. He'd commanded millions of soldiers. Allied leaders deferred to his judgment. His name was on everyone's lips as the architect of victory. In that moment, Eisenhower wielded more concentrated military authority than any American in history. If he'd wanted to march his armies back to Washington and seize control of the government, who could have stopped him? Throughout history, victorious generals have done exactly that. Caesar crossed the Rubicon. Napoleon crowned himself emperor. Countless military commanders turned battlefield success into political dictatorship. But when people approached Eisenhower, some seriously, some testing, suggesting he could take power without bothering with elections, his response revealed everything about American democracy's survival. He said no, immediately, unequivocally, and his reasons why tell us something profound about what separates democracies from dictatorships. If you want to see how one man's character saved American democracy, hit subscribe right now. To understand the choice Eisenhower faced, you need to grasp the unprecedented authority he controlled in 1945. Eisenhower commanded Operation Overlord, the Allied invasion of Europe. Under his authority sat American, British, Canadian, and Free French forces. Millions of soldiers answered to his orders. The largest amphibious invasion in history launched at his command. By war's end, he was Supreme Commander Allied Expeditionary Force. Think about that title, Supreme Commander, not just of American forces, but of a multinational coalition spanning continents. His military decisions shaped the political fate of entire nations. When France was liberated, Eisenhower determined which French political factions would govern. When Germany surrendered, Eisenhower's forces occupied vast territories, making decisions about civil administration, resource distribution, and population movements. He controlled nuclear-capable bombers, though the bombs themselves remained under civilian control. He directed armies that occupied Germany, Austria, and parts of Eastern Europe. His signature on documents determined whether cities surrendered peacefully or faced bombardment. American soldiers revered him. They'd followed him from North Africa through Sicily, from Normandy through Germany. He'd led them to victory against the most formidable military machine the world had seen. Their loyalty to Eisenhower personally was profound. Politicians worldwide courted his favor. Churchill sought his counsel. De Gaulle negotiated with him. Stalin respected him. Truman relied on him. Eisenhower's opinions shaped post-war settlements. Add to this the American public's adoration. Eisenhower wasn't just a general, he was a national hero. Parades, magazine covers, naming rights for streets and schools. Americans trusted him more than they trusted most politicians. This combination, military command, political influence, public adoration, and international prestige, created a concentration of power rarely seen in democracies. The suggestion that Eisenhower could seize power didn't come from enemies or conspirators. It came from admirers who genuinely believed military leadership could solve America's problems better than messy democratic politics. Some approached with veiled hints. Political operatives would say things like, "General, the country needs strong leadership, real leadership, not politicians playing games." The implication was clear even if unstated. Others were more direct. A handful of wealthy businessmen concerned about post-war labor unrest and political uncertainty quietly suggested that Eisenhower could restore order if he chose. They framed it as saving democracy by temporarily suspending it, a familiar justification throughout history. Even some intellectuals flirted with the idea. They'd witnessed how weak democracies fell to fascism in the 1930s. They worried American democracy was too fragmented, too inefficient to handle post-war challenges. Perhaps, they suggested, a benevolent strongman, someone like Eisenhower, could provide stability until things settled down. The most serious overture came wrapped in political legitimacy. Both major parties wanted Eisenhower as their presidential candidate. Before anyone knew his party affiliation, Democrats and Republicans both courted him. They weren't offering dictatorship, they were offering legitimate electoral power. But some went further, suggesting he didn't need elections. His popularity was so overwhelming that he could simply declare himself president and the public would accept it. Why bother with campaigns and opponents when everyone already wanted him in charge? There's no evidence Eisenhower ever seriously considered a coup, but the offers revealed something important. The infrastructure for dictatorship existed. Public support, military loyalty, political vacuum, international legitimacy. All the pieces were there. What was missing was Eisenhower's willingness to use them. Eisenhower's rejection of dictatorial power wasn't based on a single principle. It reflected his entire worldview, shaped by decades of military service in a democracy. Military subordination to civilian authority. Eisenhower had spent 35 years in an army that drilled one principle above all others. The military serves civilian government, never the reverse. From West Point through his entire career, this wasn't just policy, it was identity. Officers who forgot this threatened everything the military existed to protect. When people suggested he could take power, Eisenhower reportedly responded, "I've spent my entire adult life serving civilian leadership. You think I'd throw that away the moment I have the power to betray it? That would make me exactly what we just defeated." Understanding of how dictatorships begin. Unlike most Americans, Eisenhower had seen firsthand how democratic collapse happens. He'd studied the rise of fascism in Europe. He'd witnessed how Hitler and Mussolini had exploited democratic weaknesses. He knew dictatorships almost never begin with generals announcing they're seizing power. They begin with temporary measures to restore order that never end. Personal humility. Eisenhower's leadership style was collaborative, not authoritarian. He'd spent the war managing a coalition of allies with competing interests. Success required negotiation, compromise, and respecting others' perspectives. The qualities that made him an effective Allied commander were incompatible with dictatorship. Faith in democratic systems. Eisenhower believed democracy's messy inefficiency was a feature, not a bug. He'd seen Nazi totalitarian efficiency in Nazi Germany and knew it came at the cost of human freedom. Better to have slow, democratic decisions made with consent than fast, dictatorial decisions imposed by force. Recognition of his own limitations. Military genius doesn't translate to political wisdom. Eisenhower knew this. He understood warfare, logistics, and coalition management. He didn't presume this made him qualified to run a peacetime government without democratic accountability. When a political operative told him the country needed his leadership, Eisenhower responded, "The country needs leadership chosen by the people. I'm a soldier. If the people want me in government, they can elect me, but I'll never take power they haven't given me freely." Eisenhower's decision to reject dictatorial power becomes more remarkable when you see how rare it is historically. Throughout history, victorious generals facing similar circumstances almost always seized power. Julius Caesar led Roman legions to victory in Gaul, then marched on Rome and destroyed the Republic. His power base, loyal soldiers and popular support, mirrors what Eisenhower had. Napoleon Bonaparte rose through military ranks during the French Revolution, saved the Republic from chaos, then crowned himself emperor. His justification? France needed strong leadership and democracy had failed. Oliver Cromwell led parliamentary forces to victory in the English Civil War, then dissolved Parliament and ruled as Lord Protector. Military necessity, he claimed, superseded democratic process. Francisco Franco used military rebellion to overthrow Spain's democratic government, then ruled as dictator for 36 years. He framed it as saving Spain from chaos. Latin American caudillos throughout the 19th and 20th centuries followed the same pattern: military victory, popular support, seizure of power, authoritarian rule. The pattern is depressingly consistent. Successful generals command loyal armies. They develop popular followings. Democratic governments appear weak or corrupt by comparison. The general, or his supporters, decides democracy is inefficient or dangerous. Power is seized temporarily to restore order. The temporary dictatorship becomes permanent. Eisenhower had every element of this pattern: loyal army, popular support, perceived governmental weakness, people urging him to act, the precedent of other democracies collapsing into military rule. But he broke the pattern. He subordinated military power to democratic process. He trusted the people to choose leaders rather than having leaders chosen by force. When Eisenhower finally did enter politics, he did it the right way, through democratic election. In 1952, both parties still wanted him. The Republicans convinced him to run on their ticket, though his political views were so moderate he could have run as a Democrat without changing positions. The campaign revealed Eisenhower's conception of leadership. He didn't run as the military hero who'd saved the world. He ran as a public servant asking for a job. His slogan was, "I like Ike," friendly, approachable, democratic. His opponent, Adlai Stevenson, was an intellectual Democrat who'd served as Illinois governor. The contrast was stark: war hero versus politician, plain-spoken versus eloquent, moderate versus liberal. Eisenhower won decisively, but here's what matters. He won through votes, not force. He convinced Americans through speeches and debates, not through military intimidation. He accepted democratic process even though he could have bypassed it. During the campaign, someone suggested he could win by simply reminding Americans of his military service, implying that was enough qualification. Eisenhower rejected this. "My military service proves I can follow orders and lead soldiers. It doesn't prove I should govern civilians. That's for voters to decide." Eisenhower's presidency from 1953 to 1961 proved his democratic instincts were genuine, not just campaign rhetoric. He faced crises where authoritarian leaders would have seized emergency powers. Cold War tensions with the Soviet Union threatened nuclear war. Eisenhower could have used this danger to expand presidential authority indefinitely. Instead, he worked within constitutional limits and congressional oversight. Desegregation battles in the South tested federal authority. When Arkansas Governor Orville Faubus refused to integrate schools, Eisenhower enforced the law with military force, but only after exhausting legal options and only to uphold constitutional rights, not to expand his own power. Recession in 1958 created economic anxiety. Eisenhower could have nationalized industries or implemented emergency controls. He didn't, trusting market mechanisms and democratic institutions. His farewell address in 1961 warned about the military-industrial complex, the danger that military and corporate interests could corrupt democracy. The man who'd commanded history's largest military coalition warned his successor about military power threatening civilian government. Think about that. Eisenhower could have been the beneficiary of military-industrial power. Instead, he warned against it because he believed democracy required vigilant protection from military overreach. Eisenhower's choice in 1945 matters beyond historical interest. It's a case study in how democracies survive. Democracy's vulnerability isn't primarily foreign invasion or economic collapse. It's the internal temptation to embrace strongman leadership when democracy seems inefficient or uncertain. The appeal of someone who'll just get things done without democratic constraints has toppled more democracies than foreign conquest. Eisenhower faced that temptation at its purest. He had genuine military brilliance. He had overwhelming popularity. He had historical justification. Washington had become president after all. He had supporters arguing democracy needed his leadership. But he understood something crucial. The moment you bypass democratic process, even with good intentions, even with popular support, you've destroyed the principle that makes democracy work. Democracy isn't just about outcomes, it's about process, accountability, and consent. His choice created a precedent that protected American democracy. Future military leaders knew they couldn't point to Eisenhower as justification for military intervention in politics. He'd explicitly rejected that path. Every subsequent president who peacefully left office after losing re-election followed Eisenhower's precedent. Every general who remained subordinate to civilian authority honored the principle Eisenhower upheld. The question, what if Eisenhower had said yes, reveals how fragile democratic norms can be. Would anyone have stopped him? Would the military have resisted? Would the public have protested or accepted it as necessary? We don't know, because Eisenhower never forced the question. He chose democracy before anyone had to defend it. Eisenhower's rejection of dictatorial power teaches several lessons. Character matters more than structure. Constitutional safeguards are important, but they depend on leaders willing to honor them. Eisenhower's character, his commitment to civilian control, his humility, his democratic faith mattered more than legal barriers that he could have overcome. Democratic norms are fragile. The infrastructure for dictatorship existed in 1945 America. What prevented it wasn't impossible, it was Eisenhower's refusal. This should concern us because it means democracy requires not just good systems, but good people. Military service doesn't equal political right. Eisenhower understood that leading armies doesn't justify ruling civilians. His military success gave him qualifications for elected office, not the right to bypass elections. Power respected is more lasting than power seized. Eisenhower became president through democratic election. His authority as president was legitimate, respected, and effective because it came from consent, not force. Dictators seize power quickly, but face constant challenges to legitimacy. The dangerous appeal of efficiency. Democracy is inefficient. Dictatorships appear to get things done faster, but Eisenhower understood that speed purchased with freedom is too expensive, a lesson many societies learn only after losing democracy. May 1945, the most powerful military commander in American history faced a choice that would define American democracy's future. Dwight D. Eisenhower could have seized power. The means existed. The opportunity was there. The justifications, restoring order, providing strong leadership, saving democracy from itself, were offered. He said no. Not because he lacked ambition or confidence, not because he was weak or indecisive, but because he understood something fundamental. Democracy survives only when those with power choose to limit themselves. 7 years later, Eisenhower did become president through elections, not force. He served 2 terms and peacefully transferred power to his successor. He demonstrated that military brilliance and democratic humility aren't contradictory. Every dictator in history believed they were necessary. They convinced themselves or claimed to believe that their people needed strongman leadership, that democracy was too weak or corrupt, that they alone could fix things. Eisenhower could have made the same arguments with more justification than most. He'd actually saved the world. His leadership had demonstrably worked. His popularity was genuine, not manufactured. But he trusted democracy more than he trusted himself. And that choice, that one decision to say no when he could have said yes, may have mattered as much as any battle he won. America could have had a dictator in 1945. It had a Democrat instead. Not because the system prevented it, but because one man chose principle over power. That's how democracies survive. Not through perfect systems, but through leaders who honor them even when they don't have to. What do you think would have happened if Eisenhower had seized power? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more stories about the choices that shaped democracy, subscribe now. See you next time.